I thought that one of the reasons that writing out of and within African American culture was precisely this load of information from everywhere. In my own family, the mixture between, in the language, there was street language, there was sermonic language. You know, people actually quoted the Bible to you as a child and said, you know, nothing is more, and I'm not going to remember one of them, but they had biblical phrases in regular conversation. Or they had lyrics from songs. Or they had journalism. So that they pulled from everywhere. My mother sang like a dream. She just had the best voice there ever was. I have never heard anyone sing like her. And the way she sang everything. She could sing opera. She could sing blues. She sang in the choir. She was a soprano. People used to come to town to hear her. And she sang all day. I mean, you remember, there was a time when people used to walk around singing, you know, before radios and before television. To walk up and down the street, you hear people singing, yes. Or in the backyard or in the kitchen. And that was not just my mother, my aunts, all of them. But she was special, her voice. But I just remember that there was nothing sort of alien and foreign to us.
She sounded like a person who was interested in the arts.
She very much.
I mean, the theater,
very
and
much.
Singing.
That's right, very much. And, you know, I'm sure if she had a druther life, it would have been.
Yes, it sounds like it, yes.
She was, you know, and she respected people who were artists, you see. Now, that quality of richness, when I began to write something like Song of Solomon, and I was trying to pull from the kind of culture that existed already in a northern town that had a large black community in it, so that the history was in their songs. And the history was also in little tales they told themselves, half told. And the history was also in the mixture of, and notice that book stops in 1963.
Yes.
I wanted to get it just before, you know, things broke out and became much more articulate and focused, yes. You know, along with civil rights movement.
Yes.
But up until that time, that's where that information was coming from. Now, I started out, frankly, thinking about a story I had always heard, because I was very enchanted with the myths that and saga and, you know, mythological stories that had been told to us as we were kids. Because I thought the one thing you say about a myth is that there's some truth in there, no matter how bizarre they may seem. And the one that I had always heard that seemed like just a child's wish was the one about black people, black slaves, who came to the United States. And under certain circumstances, they would fly back to Africa. So that's, you know, yeah, it's an escape thing, you know, it's a little psychological trick. But when I looked at it more closely, I read a lot of those slave narratives, you know, that they published in the 30s. And the interviewer would ask certain basic questions and then some others. He or she always asked that. Have you ever heard of flying Africans? Or people taken up and flying back to Africa? They also asked about ghosts, you know, trying to get at the heart of their mythology and their magic. And everybody said one of two things. No, I never saw any, but I heard about it.
Yes.
Or they said they had seen it. Most people said, yeah, I never saw it, but there was a woman there. So it wasn't like they said, no one said, what are you talking about? In Africa, where you get that? They all had heard it. So I knew there were some people, Georgia Sion and people, who still had this thing. So I thought about that in what I thought was a much more interesting way. Instead of just being a child or a sort of naive escape story, it's about flight.
Yes.
It really is about flight. And flight comes up a lot in spirituals. I'll fly away. Oh, Jesus, I'll fly away.
Understandably.
Understandably.
Yes.
So what is there about that? It's probably escape. It's also the move away from earth into things that were more spiritual. I mean, it has a lot of connotations. So I'm thinking, how can I make a contemporary story about a black man, young black man, who learns to fly, or who makes his escape? Not geographical escape back to
Yes.
Africa, but another mindset.
Yes.
How does he escape the prison, the cultural prison that he found himself in? And that was his journey. It's a kind of an unlearning and a learning.
Fantastic.
But it was all embedded in my, those little questions you ask about a very simple story.